Good morning, Dave Wilde, Newbridge Baptist Church. Yesterday I had the opportunity to go to the Conservation Park of Virginia with a couple friends of mine. One of my friends, Andrew Cornell, who I've known since college, which I went to college between 1990, fall of 97, and I graduated in 2002. I've known Andrew for a long time. He was a police officer up in Prince William County, and he has worked he's worked with Homeland Security as an analyst. He's worked with State Department as a weapons instructor. Now he is working up in Alexandria as an EMT. He has from his weapons instructor days. I don't know what all in the world he got into, but he knows an awful lot about shooting. He knows a lot about guns. He knows a lot about movement. He knows a lot about a lot of neat stuff. And from time to time, we'll go out to a range. And yesterday we got an opportunity to take ARs and 9mm out to the conservation park and just tested out some gear that I had bought. I have a plate carrier, Paraclete vest. It's got a little bit of stuff on it, and I bought a chest rig. It's got some ammo pouches and stuff on it, and had an opportunity to test that out. Did some drills, had a good time. Got a chance to just hang out and visit. And my other friend, Mike Griffith from Newbridge, who I think he lives his life, half his life, out at Conservation Park of Virginia. He was out there with us, shot with us, and we had a pretty good time visiting. And we were probably out there 3 or 4 hours, burned up a bunch of primers, and exercised our constitutional rights. Anyways, Andrew, thanks for a good time. Had an awesome time. Hoping to do that again sometime. Mike, I know that you will never ever watch this video because you have no use for Facebook whatsoever. So, anyways, I could probably say anything about you and you would never know unless somebody told you. But I'm going to say, love you like my dad. All right? Andrew, you're my brother, and just appreciate you. We'll see you again soon sometime. So I'm answering questions yet again today, and I'm trying to say less in this video. So if I seem awkward, it's because I'm watching my every word, trying not to say So I'm trying to improve my presentation just a little bit. So now somebody's going to go back and count how many times I said in this video. So see, there it was right there. You hear that? So the question that I'm answering today is this. It comes from one of our students in the gathering, and he writes, Dave, I'm currently reading Judges 8, and towards the end, after Gideon kills Zebah and Zalmunna, he creates an ephod. It later states in Judges 8:27 that the ephod had become a snare to his family, to Gideon and his family. My question is, what does it mean in becoming a snare? I've tried Googling it, and the most common thing to pop up is becoming a better snare drummer. I see snare a lot, so I was wondering if you could clarify that for me. So let me start in answering this question with a little background on the word snare. Often in these kinds of situations, if you can take the word in the Bible that is causing you a little confusion, or it's causing you to wonder, what's this mean? If you can take that and you can go back to the original language, find a Bible dictionary, and find what the original word meant, it can help you. That's part of doing word studies. Now, I've got some Bible study software that helps me to do all this. And I'll do a video probably later on to describe some of the resources that that I use in doing my own word studies. So let me just start here with the word snare. In Hebrew, the word that is the Hebrew word that is rendered snare is mokesh, and it means bait, lure, snare. It is a noun, and it's something that is a lure or a trap. The root word for snare is a word called yakosh. So the word mokesh, which means a snare, comes from the word yakosh, which means to lure, to entice, to snare, to lay a snare, to set a trap, to lay snares, as in wicked devices, to be ensnared, to be caught by bait, or to be entrapped. Now, why does your Google search bring up becoming a better snare drummer? And you probably know this. The guy who submitted this question. I know you're into music. I know you're into these kinds of things. But if you look underneath a snare drum on a drum kit, you'll see these little wires on the bottom. If you disengage those wires, you just kind of get the hollow, just sort of standard drum sound. Just kind of a boom, 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 boom. If you engage the drums, you get this snappy, distorted sound, this pop, 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 pop. So those snare wires on the bottom are obviously why a snare drum is called a snare drum. So the etymology, and etymology just basically means the original roots and meanings of words. So this word snare comes from lots of different languages. It means a noose for catching animals. I think that's from a late Old English. I got some notes here that I've scratched down a few things. There's an Old Norse word, snara, which means noose or snare. There's an old word called sonri. Maybe the word sonri, I can't, it's hard for me to try to decipher what these notes are. I just kind of copied and pasted a couple things from the internet. Sonri means twisted rope. There's a word snarko, which I think is a Proto-Germanic word, and it means snare. There's an old High German word that is snare. There's a German word schnur, which means noose or cord. So you can see that these words, these original words, sound very similar to the word snare, and they mean a cord or a string or a noose or a snare, something that's strung from one thing to another, and often it's used to capture or to hold something. In the 1680s, there's a Dutch word called snaar, which means string. It was used to refer to a string across a drum. It seems that, just did a little research here. Hopefully this is correct. In 1938, the word snare was used for snare drum. So, in the context of Judges 8:27, it would appear that Gideon had an interaction with the Israelites. Let me read this, and then we'll jump into what all these things mean. Okay, it says this. Judges 8, if you have your Bible, I'm in Judges chapter 8, verses 22 through 27. The Israelites said to Gideon, "Rule over us, you, your son, and your grandson, because you have saved us from the hand of Midian." But Gideon told them, "I will not rule over you, nor will my son rule over you. The Lord will rule over you." And he said, "I do have one request, that each of you give me an earring from your share of the plunder." It was the custom of the Ishmaelites to wear gold earrings. They answered, "We'll be glad to give them." So they spread out a garment, and each of them threw a ring from his plunder onto it. The weight of the gold rings he asked for came to 1,700 shekels, not counting the ornaments, the pendants, and the purple garments worn by the kings of Midian, or the chains that were on their camels' necks. Gideon made the gold into an ephod. More on that in just a second. What is an ephod? Which he placed in Ophrah, his town. All Israel prostituted themselves by worshiping it, and it became a snare to Gideon and his family. And there's the question. What does the word snare mean? So in the context of Judges 8:27, it appears that while Gideon did not want to rule over the Israelites as they requested in verse 22, he did ask for a sort of a tax where for his reward for his efforts on their behalf. Remember Gideon, he was this awesome warrior. He started out with thousands, tens of thousands of warriors, and God whittled his forces down to 300. It's like the original, you've seen the 300 movie. Well, there was an actual incident, not based on Leonidas in the 300, but it's interesting that there's sort of a parallel of the 300 warriors overcoming hundreds of thousands of enemies. So the amount of gold that he ended up receiving was somewhere around, it was 1,700 shekels in the Bible is what it says, but it was about 43 pounds. So to the person who asked this question, I know you go to the gym a lot. Imagine a 45-pound plate. It was about that much gold, so it's quite a bit. This ends up being, now let me just give you just another little more background. 43 pounds, a standard pound is typically 16 ounces. Gold is measured in troy ounces. And I think a troy ounce is there's either 12 troy ounces or 14.37. Those two numbers are in my head right now. You can back this out if you want to and on your own time. but I did the math here. There are 627.08 troy ounces of gold in 43 pounds. So you can take 627.08, divide that by 43, and there you go. Now you know how many troy ounces are in a pound of gold. Yay for you. So 627.08 troy ounces of gold, which would be valued today at almost $857,000. I think I did these notes a day or two ago. The value of gold per ounce was $1,366 per ounce. So, for whatever reason, Gideon had this gold made into a thing called an ephod. Well, what's an ephod? The ephod was a priestly garment that was worn by the high priest. Now, the ephod was a cloth garment, and it seems like it was sort of an undergarment that was worn underneath the breastplate. Now, I know yesterday we were out at the range. Andrew had on his plate carrier, had several magazine pouches on his. I don't have quite as much gear on mine. I have some magazines on mine, and it's kind of it. But that body armor can end up, when you put gear on it, can end up weighing 40 pounds. When I was in the Marine Corps, we had this it's not the same thing they use today. So if you're reading this, I'm going to date myself a little bit. We had 782 gear. It was an H harness, web belt, and we put magazines and stuff on those. And on mine, we had, I'm going to get it wrong now, we had 4 magazine pouches, 3 magazines apiece, 9mm pouches, water, a thing called a butt pack on the back, which we put some survival gear in. So all the stuff that we had on our 782 gear actually ended up weighing about 35 or 40 pounds. So that's before we even put our backpacks with all that gear on. So you got cloth and metal combined there. So whatever Gideon did with this gold, it seems that he wove it into some kind of a garment that was a priestly garment. The ephod was a priestly garment. So the breastplate that was over, that went over the top of this ephod, had the 12 different types of stones that represented the 12 tribes of Israel. I believe the Urim and the Thummim, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, was also incorporated in the rest of the priestly garments as well. So I would imagine that whatever it was exactly that Gideon had fashioned here, it was modeled after these priestly garments. Now, perhaps it was in this way that Gideon was trying to honor God. It doesn't say that in the Bible. It doesn't say Gideon did this because he was trying to honor God. I'm reading in just a little bit, but why would he do this? Why would he collect this gold from these people and have it fashioned into a garment like this? He did not seem to have any evil motivations or anything to that effect. So it may have been that he was taking this and creating this as an offering back to God. The problem is, it says in verse 27, all Israel prostituted themselves by worshiping it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and his family. So, what does this mean? The Israelites were absolutely famous for turning from God and worshiping according to pagan practices. Gideon creates this garment, and maybe it was meant to honor God. The Israelites end up worshiping it as an idol. This kind of brings back to mind Moses coming back down with the 10 Commandments off the mountain, and there are his people worshiping a golden calf, which, if you go back and read that story, it's very, very similar. The Israelites had this golden calf molded from things that they donated into a big pot, melted them all down, created this calf, and began to worship that. And Moses comes down, well, here they are worshiping a calf. So worshiping a garment or worshiping an animal, the Israelites are known to worship some strange things in pagan practices. So, the word of this is, all Israel prostituted themselves to sell yourself for money, to use your sinful nature to profit yourself, is how the Old Testament uses this word prostituted. They sold themselves. They sold out their faith. They sold out God for gain. So they engaged in these sinful practices for their own gain. And so the word prostitute doesn't mean literally sex for money, but often it means this practice of selling out God for your own gain. So you find something better that I'm going to get some. I'm going to receive a reward for money or whatever, and I'm going to go do that and dishonor God. That's how the word prostitute is used here. How did it become a snare? Stop and think about this. Now, I know not everybody's going to agree with me. I'm going to speak to you from my perspective. I don't care. I do care if you're a believer, but you can come back on and comment on this video and say, "Oh, I don't believe that, this and that. That's just your opinion." It is my opinion. These videos are my opinion, but they're based in my experience. So I don't want to hear anybody come in to the comments on a video and just complain, "Oh, that's not reality." No, it's not your reality. I'm talking about my reality here. When it talks about becoming a snare, I have a problem with anger. I do. I just do. My anger will often get the best of me. And I find that when I let my anger get the best of me, I let it rule me, I let it reign over me, I become trapped in patterns that dishonor God. When I am engaged in sin, when I am engaged with my anger, I cannot worship God properly. I can't evangelize properly. There's a lot of things that I can't do properly, and it changes the way I think. It changes the way I look at life, and I become a person. And there's an old Dave that many of y'all don't know that I did not like. I talked about this on Sunday at my father-in-law's um, uh, memorial service. There was a person at one point that I did not like. I did not like who I was, and I don't like that person that I become when I engage with my own sin, because I find myself distanced from God. Now, again, I don't care if you agree with me or disagree with me. This doesn't have anything to do with you agreeing or disagreeing with me. But I feel trapped. When I engage sin and I become distant from God, I feel trapped. I'm trapped by my sin because I can't worship Him. I can't pray. I can't even read my Bible right. And there's something disheartening and discouraging about that. Just imagine someone uh, is freed from alcohol and they're walking a Christian life and they somehow become trapped back into that. Imagine how trapped that is. You're trapped between sin, the sin of addiction, and your belief in God. It's it is a trap. It's a horrible thing, and this is what the Bible is talking about whenever it says that Gideon and his family probably is a reference to Gideon was affected by this, and his family were also affected by this. But the whole nation of Israel was trapped in this. They couldn't worship God. They were trapped in their sin. They were what are they being trapped and held back from? They're being held back from a relationship with the Lord. They're trapped in their sin so that they can't engage God properly. So just stop and think about that. What is that in our own lives? What does that look like? What is what is that one thing? What is that thing? Maybe it's a couple things that keeps that thing that keeps us from worshiping God properly. Maybe it's time to let some of that stuff go. Maybe it's time to start loosening those shackles. And I'm telling you, if you just realize that you're trapped, realize that you're caught up in a sinful pattern, ask God to break those chains. I'm telling you, I'm that guy that God reached down and ripped some chains apart. I've seen God just break chains. There is no chain too strong for God that He cannot break. So anyways, I hope this has been helpful.